Okay, so we're in the Gemara. This is Daf Yomi, Avodah, Daf 40. So at the end of 39, it says, the Mishnah further teaches, in tarif fish that is not minced and brine that has fish in it are permitted. The sages taught what is considered tarit that has not been minced. Any fish whose head and spine are recognizable. And what is considered brine that has fish in it? Any brine that has one killed bit or two killed biot floating in it. Now we're Daf 40. The Gemara asks, now that you have said that brine which has only one kilbut and it is permitted, is it necessary to teach that brine that has two kilbiot and it is also permitted? The Gemara explains that it is not difficult. Here, two kilbiot are required to permit the brine as it is contained in open barrels, but there, only one is required since it is in sealed barrels. It was stated that Rav Huna says, tarit is not permitted for consumption until its head and spine are recognizable. So Rav Nachman says, it is permitted if either the head or the spine is recognizable. So Rav Ukva Bar Chama raises an objection from a Mishnah in Chulin 59a. With regard to fish, any that has fins and scales is permitted. So evidently the kashrut of fish is determined only by its fins and scales, not its head or its spine. So Abaye said, when that Mishnah is taught, it is in reference to the Ara'ah and the Falmudah, fish whose heads are similar to the heads of non-kosher fish. The Gemara analyzes the dispute between Rav Huna and Rav Nachman. Rav Yehuda said in the name of Ula, the dispute applies to dripping foods in their brine. But with regard to eating their actual bodies, everyone agrees that it is prohibited until both the head and the spine are recognizable. The Gemara notes that Rabbi Zarah said, originally I would dip foods in their brine, but once I heard that which Rav Yehuda said in the name of Ula, the dispute is only with regard to dipping foods in their brine. But with regard to eating their actual bodies, everyone agrees that it is prohibited until both the head and the spine are recognizable. I too no longer dip foods in their brine. So Rav Papa said, the halacha is that tarit is prohibited until the head and the spine of each and every fish is recognizable. The Gemara raised an objection to Rav Papa's statement from a Braita. With regard to pieces of fish that have a sign of kashrut, whether this sign is present in all of them or only in a minority of them, and even if it is present only in one fish out of 100 of them, they are all permitted. And there was an incident involving a certain Gentile who brought a large jug of pieces of fish, and a sign of kashrut was found in one of them. And Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel permitted the entire jug of fish. This apparently contradicts Rav Papa's assertion that all the pieces must be recognizable for them to be permitted. Rav Papa interpreted that Braita as referring to a case where the pieces correspond to each other, that is, they fit together so it is clear that they are all from the same fish. The Gemara raises a difficulty. If that is so, what is the purpose of stating this explicitly? If the pieces correspond, it is obvious that they are permitted as they evidently come from the same kosher fish. The Gemara explains that this was taught lest you say that one should be concerned that perhaps the pieces merely happen to fit together. The Braita therefore teaches us that in such a case, the pieces are permitted. The Gemara relates that there was a certain ship carrying tzachanta, which came to the city of Sichra. So Rav Huna bar Hinana went out and saw that the fish had scales on them and permitted them, as any fish with scales is kosher. So in the written Torah, it says that the fish must have fins and scales, but by oral tradition, we know that any fish that has scales also has fins. So it says, as any fish with scales is kosher. So Rava said to him, but is there anyone who permits tzachanta as a case like this, when it is from a land where fish with scales are common, and it is very possible that the scales are from kosher fish that had been in the boat previously? So Shofarot went out from the court of Rava to herald a declaration promulgating his ruling, and he thereby prohibited all the fish on that boat. And Shofarot went out from the court of Rav Huna bar Hinana, and he thereby permitted the fish. The Gemara presents two interpretations of the above ruling. So Rav Yirmiyah of Difti said, Rav Papi said to me that when Rav Huna bar Hinana permitted fish on the ship, he was referring only to their brine, but with regard to their bodies, no, he did not permit them. So Rav Ashi said, Rav Papa said to me that when Rav Huna bar Hinana permitted the fish, he was referring even to their bodies. So Rav Ashi continued, and I do not prohibit the fish, as Rav Papa said to me that Rav Huna permitted it. But I also do not permit the fish, as Rav Yehuda said to me in the name of Ula, that the dispute between Rava and Rav Huna bar Hinana is referring to dipping foods in their brine. But with regard to eating their actual bodies, everyone agrees that it is prohibited until both the head and the spine of each and every fish are recognizable. So Rav Hinana bar Idi sat before Rav Ada bar Ahava, and he sat and said, with regard to a Gentile who brought a boat that was full of barrels of fish brine, and a kilbit was found in one of the barrels, the halacha is as follows. If the barrels were open, they are all permitted. If they were closed, then the barrel with the kilbit is permitted, and all the others are prohibited. Rav Ada bar Ahava said to him, from where do we know this? Rav Hinana bar Idi responded, I heard this from 3 verses, the great sages upon whom one can rely as though their statements were recorded in verses. So from Rav and Shmuel and Rabbi Yochanan. The Gemara discusses the halacha with regard to the other parts of the fish. So Rav Baruna says that Rav says, fish intestines in the roe may be purchased only from an expert. Ula raises a contradiction to Rabbi Dostai of Biri from the fact that Rav says fish intestines in their roe may be purchased only from an expert. It may be inferred that a non-kosher fish has roe. As otherwise, there would be no reason to permit only roe purchased from an expert. And the Gemara raises a contradiction to this claim from the following Braita. A non-kosher fish gives birth, whereas a kosher fish lays eggs. Rabbi Dostai accepted this opinion and said, delete the phrase, the roe from here. Rabbi Zarah said to him, do not delete it, as both kosher and non-kosher fish are fish that lay, that is, produce eggs. But this kosher fish promulgates externally by laying eggs in the water, which later hatch, and that non-kosher fish promulgates internally by keeping the eggs in its own body until they develop. Nevertheless, both produce roe, and there is therefore a reason to be concerned that a Jew might purchase non-kosher roe. The Gemara asks, but even so, why do I need an expert? Let one check the signs of kashrut on the roe itself, as it is taught in Braita, like the signs of bird eggs, so are the signs of fish. The Gemara interjects, does it enter your mind to say that the signs of kashrut for fish are the same as the signs of kashrut for eggs? That is not so, as the signs of kosher fish are the possession of fins and scales, as written in the Torah with regard to them. Rather, the Braita meaning to say, like the signs of bird eggs, so are the signs of fish roe. The Braita continues, and these are the signs of bird eggs. Any egg that narrows at the top and is rounded, so that one of its ends is wide and the other one of its ends is pointed, is kosher. If both of its ends are sharp or both of its ends are wide, it is non-kosher. If the yolk is on the outside and the albumin is on the inside, it is non-kosher. If the albumin is on the outside and the yolk is on the inside, it is kosher. If the yolk and albumin are mixed with each other, this is the egg of a creeping animal. So considering that one can easily determine the kashrut of such eggs, why are only those purchased from an expert permitted? So Rav says, Rav's ruling refers specifically to a case where the eggs have melted together and it is impossible to determine whether or not they are kosher based on these signs. The Gemara asks, but according to the opinion of Rabbi Dostai of Biri, who accepted the idea that non-kosher fish do not lay eggs and says, delete from here the phrase, their roe, it is difficult. The Gemara elaborates, but isn't it taught in Braita? As it is interpreted above, like the signs of bird eggs, so are the signs of fish roe. Apparently, the Braita assumes that non-kosher fish roe exist. The Gemara answers, didn't you yourself find it necessary to explain and reinterpret the Braita, as it cannot be understood according to its straightforward meaning? So Rabbi Dostai can also explain the Braita so that it effectively reads, like the signs of bird eggs, so are the signs of fish intestines. Accordingly, the Braita never actually mentions fish roe at all. The Gemara raises a difficulty, but where do you find that one of the signs of fish intestines is that they must be round and pointed? The Gemara answers, you find this with regard to the swim bladder of fish, which is considered to be kosher if it is shaped like a kosher egg. The Gemara asks, if there is no expert there, and one cannot determine whether or not the fish roe is kosher, what is the halacha? So Rav Yehuda says that once the seller says, I sold at the fish from which this roe came and they were kosher, the roe is permitted. So Rav Nachman says, the roe is prohibited until the seller shows kosher fish to the buyer and says, these are the fish and these are their intestines. That is, the roe is permitted only if the seller can present the fish that produced it. So the Gemara relates, Rav Yehuda instructed Ada, his attendant, once the seller says, I salted them, they are permitted. The Mishnah teaches, in the leaf of a hiltit plant is permitted. The Gemara asks, since the previous Mishnah prohibited a sliver of hiltit only due to the concern that it might have been sliced with a non-kosher knife, isn't it obvious that a leaf which has not been sliced is permitted? So the Gemara answers, it is necessary to teach this only with regard to the slivers of hiltit that might be found on the leaf, lest you say that one should be concerned that perhaps a Gentile might bring slivers sliced with non-kosher knife and mix it with the slivers on the leaf. The Mishnah therefore teaches us that it is assumed that the slivers on the leaf had stuck to it and came off with the plant when it was pulled from the ground. The Mishnah teaches, in rolled olive cakes, the Gemara asks, isn't it obvious that these are permitted? For what reason might they be prohibited? The Gemara answers, no, it is necessary to teach that they are permitted even though they are very soft, lest you say that there is a concern that they softened because a Gentile placed wine in them. And the Mishnah therefore teaches us that these olives have softened due to the oil that they possess. Okay, the Mishnah further teaches, and Rabbi Yoshi says, overripe olives are prohibited. The Gemara asks, what are overripe olives like? Rabbi Yoshi bar Hanina says, this is referring to any olive, if one grasps it in his hand, its pit slips out due to the softness of the olive. The Mishnah teaches locusts that come from a salesman's basket are prohibited, like those that come from the storeroom are permitted. So the sages taught in Bright to locusts and caper buds and leeks that come from the storehouse and from the storeroom and from a Gentile shipper are permitted. Those that are sold in the market from baskets that are in front of the storekeeper are prohibited, because it is assumed that the Gentile storekeeper sprinkles wine upon them. And similarly, with regard to apple wine that belongs to Gentiles, those that come from the storehouse or from the storeroom or from a salesman's basket are permitted. So apple wine that is sold in the market is prohibited because they mix grape wine of Gentiles in it. The Gemara cites a relevant incident. The sages taught, once Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi felt discomfort in his stomach and knew that apple wine would alleviate it. He said, isn't there any person who knows whether apple wine of Gentiles is prohibited or permitted? So Rabbi Yishmael ben Rabbi Yoshi said before him, once my father felt discomfort in his stomach, and they brought him apple wine of Gentiles that was 70 years old, and he drank it and was cured. So Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi said to him, you had so much knowledge in your hand that could have relieved me, and yet you caused me to suffer by withholding it until now. They checked and found one Gentile who had 300 large jugs of apple wine that was 70 years old, and Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi drank from it and was cured. He said, blessed is the omnipresent who delivered his universe to keepers. So Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi thanked God for causing the Gentile to keep the wine for 70 years so that it could be used to heal him. The Mishnah further teaches, and likewise with regard to teruma, the Gemara asks, what is the meaning of the statement, and likewise with regard to teruma? So Rav Sheshet says this means, and likewise the same halacha applies to a priest who is suspected of selling teruma, which is less expensive as non-sacred food. It is only when the food is in front of the priest that it is prohibited, but food that comes from the storehouse or from the storeroom or from a salesman's basket is permitted. The reason is that the priest is fearful because he thinks to himself, if I sell teruma in public, the sages will hear of it and deprive me of all my wares. So Hadran Allah Ein Ma'amidin. That is the end of that parak. So we pick up in parak 3. The Mishnah says, all statues are forbidden. That it is prohibited to derive benefit from them because they are worshipped at least once a year. This is the statement of Rabbi Meir. And the rabbis say, that is the majority, the only type of statue that is forbidden is any statue that has in its hand a staff or a bird or an orb. as these are indications that this statue is designated for idolatry. If the statue is holding a different item, it may be assumed that the statue was fashioned for ornamental purposes, not for worship. So Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel says, it is prohibited to derive benefit even from any statue that has any item whatsoever in its hand. The Gemara says, if it is true that the statues to which Rabbi Meir is referring are worshipped at least once a year, what is the reason for the opinion of the rabbis who permit deriving benefit from them? The Gemara answers, Rabbi Yitzchak bar Yosef says that Rabbi Yochanan says, in Rabbi Meir's locale, people would worship statues once a year, and therefore Rabbi Meir, who maintains that one must be concerned for a minority occurrence, issued a decree that statues are forbidden even in other places due to the locale where people would worship statues. And the rabbis, meaning the majority, by contrast, who do not maintain that one must be concerned for a minority occurrence, did not issue a decree that statues are forbidden even in other places due to that locale. Okay, so Rav Yehuda says that Shmuel says, we learned that this dispute between Rabbi Meir and the rabbis is only with regard to the statues of kings. So Rabbi Meir decreed that they are forbidden as perhaps they are designated for worship. The rabbis assumed that they were designated for ornamental purposes, not for worship. So Rabbi Bar Chana says that Rabbi Yochanan says, and furthermore, we learned that the dispute is only with regard to statues that stand at the entrance to the region. Since these statues were erected in an important location, there's concern that they are worshipped. And that is the end of Daf 40. So thanks for watching.